It wasn't a fear of getting it right or wrong. I had nerves because I cared so deeply about the women and the people that go through this every day. And I wanted to make sure I did their story justice. I wanted it to be truthful. And that's what drives all of this. And so at the end of the day, it was because I cared.
Right.
What happens when a beloved Hollywood actress goes full courtroom bully? Blake Lively, yes, Gossip Girl herself, just got caught in a wildfire of subpoenas, backlash, and allegations that could crush her polished image forever. But what really happened? And why are YouTubers and independent creators at the center of this legal nightmare? The lawsuit that sparked everything. It all started with a lawsuit that no one saw coming. On the surface, it looked like just another messy celebrity legal battle. But underneath, something felt off. Blake Lively, known for her glamorous roles and seemingly spotless public image, had stepped into the courtroom. But not in defense. This time, she was on the attack. She filed legal action tied to a growing controversy involving the furniture giant Wayfair. Her claim? That Wayfair and its associates were secretly orchestrating a digital smear campaign against her. A calculated, untraceable attack designed to destroy her reputation and frame her as the villain. According to her, these attacks weren't just random, they were surgical, targeted, malicious, and worst of all, hidden behind anonymous sources. But here's where things got strange. Instead of focusing her legal firepower on Wayfair itself, Blake started pointing fingers elsewhere, at creators. Not corporate executives, not marketing firms, but independent journalists, small YouTubers, TikTokers, 10 users, everyday content creators who had one thing in common. They were reporting on the lawsuit and giving it oxygen online. People who were just doing what the mainstream press sometimes won't. Digging deeper, asking uncomfortable questions, sharing court documents, speculating on motive, criticizing Blake's public moves. And just like that, they became her targets. This wasn't about defamation or libel. Most of them weren't even making claims. They were reading public filings, analyzing timelines, and expressing opinions. Yet suddenly, they were in the legal crosshairs. Blake's team began claiming these individuals might be part of a vast shadow network helping Wayfair, even without a single shred of proof. It didn't matter if they had never spoken to Wayfair or had no ties to the company. If they talked about the lawsuit, that was enough to land them on her radar. And as the subpoenas started flying, creators realized something chilling. This wasn't just a celebrity defending her reputation. It was a full-on legal offensive meant to silence the internet, one creator at a time. The subpoena shock. Then came the subpoenas. Dozens of them, sent not just to the creators themselves, but to tech giants like Google and X demanding private information, IP addresses, email accounts, user data, even financial records. It was the kind of move you'd expect from federal investigators going after a criminal syndicate, not from a Hollywood actress trying to salvage her image. Blake Lively's legal team didn't just want names. They wanted digital fingerprints, account histories, and, most disturbingly, banking details. These weren't anonymous trolls hiding in the shadows. These were real people with faces, names, and platforms of their own. And now, they were being treated like conspirators in some underground smear campaign. Some of the creators hadn't even mentioned Blake Lively in weeks. Others had merely reported on the lawsuit from publicly available court documents. Yet here they were, being dragged into a legal nightmare they had nothing to do with, except for having an opinion. And the kicker? Blake didn't reach out to them directly. She went around them. Instead of serving creators themselves, her team quietly hit up Google and X, hoping the platforms would just hand over sensitive data without a word. No warning, no chance to respond, no opportunity to defend themselves. It was a legal ambush, and that's when alarm bells started ringing. Creators began comparing notes. They realized they weren't alone. The subpoenas weren't isolated. They were part of a sweeping dragnet, targeting anyone who dared question Blake's motives or report on the case from an angle she didn't like. For many, it wasn't just insulting, it was terrifying, because most independent journalists don't have million-dollar legal teams on retainer. They don't have PR firms spinning stories in the press. They have YouTube channels, Substacks, maybe a lawyer friend they can text in a panic. But now they were being forced to lawyer up or risk losing their privacy, their accounts, even their financial security. And all because they talked. The message was clear. If you post about Blake Lively, expect a knock at the digital door. That wasn't just a chilling thought. It was a warning shot fired straight at the heart of free speech online. But what happened next proved that not everyone was going to stay silent. Creators strike back. What Blake Lively and her legal team didn't count on was this. Content creators weren't about to back down. The moment the subpoenas hit, creators began organizing. Messages were exchanged. Legal teams were consulted. And then, one by one, the motions to quash started rolling in. These weren't anonymous users hiding behind burner accounts. They were journalists, lawyers, researchers, and commentators who knew their rights and weren't afraid to invoke them. Names like Janessa, Shasty, and Lauren, all small creators with dedicated followings, filed official court motions asking the judge to throw the subpoenas out. They weren't just defending themselves, they were drawing a legal line in the sand. The message was loud and clear. We are not your scapegoats, and we're not going to be bullied into silence. Even more powerful, they didn't fight alone. Behind the scenes, creators began linking arms, pooling resources, and coordinating legal strategies. Some of their attorneys even collaborated, filing joint declarations, building a united front. It wasn't just legal resistance, it was community resistance. And suddenly, the pressure flipped. Blake's legal team, once on the offensive, began scrambling. The backlash was snowballing online. News outlets started picking up the story, and social media turned into a battlefield. Accusations flew about censorship, intimidation, and weaponizing the legal system to crush dissent. Facing mounting public outrage and the very real possibility of court sanctions, Blake Lively started to quietly reverse course. One by one, the subpoenas were withdrawn. Janessa's pulled, Shasty's gone, Lauren's dropped. Others soon followed. Ken's, Ashley, Court of Random Opinion, even people like Cassidy and Leanne Newton who hadn't yet filed motions. It was a slow-motion retreat disguised as legal housekeeping. But it wasn't a full surrender. Because here's what made it worse. While Blake's team publicly dropped some of the subpoenas, they refused to promise that they wouldn't reissue them later. And they definitely didn't rule out targeting new creators in the future. For many, it felt like a half-hearted oops with a side of legal threat. Even more disturbing, some creators said they were only dropped after their lawyers worked around the clock to force Blake's hand, sometimes calling in emergency negotiations on weekends. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a quiet, strategic pullback in the face of legal defeat. But the damage was already done. What was once framed as a defamation lawsuit had now morphed into something much darker. A high-profile actress using her platform and privilege to crush independent voices, and failing to silence them. And with the subpoenas crumbling under public scrutiny, another issue came boiling to the surface. One that painted Blake in an even more hypocritical light: the anonymous sources. Illusion one of the biggest justifications Blake's team gave for these subpoenas was the claim that creators were working with anonymous sources tied to Wayfair, that they were part of some invisible smear campaign. But here's the truth. There were no anonymous sources. The creators who were subpoenaed have all said the same thing. Every single person they spoke to was identified, verified, and unrelated to Wayfair. There were no shadow agents feeding them information, no sock puppet accounts spinning a coordinated narrative. These were people who had names, faces, paper trails, and most importantly, they had nothing to do with the parties in Blake's lawsuit. So why was Blake so desperate to unmask them? Some say it wasn't about evidence, it was about control. By demanding source info, Blake wasn't just trying to find connections, she was trying to scare creators into silence. After all, if your private communications can be subpoenaed just for reporting on a public lawsuit, who would dare cover it honestly? But journalists, yes, even small, independent ones have rights. The US Constitution protects freedom of the press. The New York Shield Law protects confidential sources. And the idea that someone can be sued or subpoenaed just for talking to the press is antithetical to democracy. Blake's legal team kept using the word anonymous like it meant fake. But that's not how journalism works. A source doesn't need to be public to be credible. Confidential does not mean imaginary. It means protected, especially when the risk of retaliation is real. And if there's one thing this entire situation made clear, it's that retaliation was very, very real. PR disaster in real time. What makes this story even more wild is that Blake Lively's team didn't stop because they had a change of heart. They stopped because they got caught. The subpoenas weren't dropped because of legal insight. They were withdrawn because creators started filing motions, journalists started asking questions, and social media exploded with outrage. Blake's team tried to quietly roll back the subpoenas one by one, hoping no one would notice. But by that point, it was too late. The story had already spread, and the silence from her camp only made things worse. There was no apology, no press release, no public assurance that the subpoenas wouldn't be reissued. Instead, it was all backdoor negotiations, emergency phone calls, and vague legal statements. And for creators, that silence was deafening, because even after their subpoenas were technically withdrawn, many still hadn't received a guarantee that Blake wouldn't come after them again. The threat still loomed. The pressure was still there. It felt less like justice and more like psychological warfare. At this point, the internet wasn't even debating the lawsuit anymore. They were focused on Blake's tactics. What started as a private legal matter had now become a public relations disaster unfolding in real time. And Blake Lively, the once beloved Hollywood darling, was being cast as the villain in her own story. Fallout, sanctions, and legal consequences. Now, the tables are turning. The very legal system Blake used to target creators may soon come back to haunt her. Legal experts are already warning that sanctions could be coming, not just for the subpoenas themselves, but for potential misuse of court procedures, privacy violations, and bad faith litigation. And her attorney, Ezra Hudson, isn't off the hook either. There's already talk of bar complaints being filed, especially after threats were made toward creators who dared to challenge the subpoenas. In the legal world, those aren't just empty threats, they're red flags. Meanwhile, Blake's own case is falling apart. She's alienated the media, enraged creators, and lost the narrative completely. Her image, once synonymous with elegance and poise, is now entangled with accusations of intimidation, hypocrisy, and censorship. And all of this, just to chase a conspiracy theory that never had legs to begin with. It's a devastating irony. In trying to silence critics, Blake Lively may have ensured that this controversy will follow her for years. She may not lose in court, but she's already lost in the court of public opinion. Conclusion: Blake Lively thought she could control the narrative. She thought she could send a message to creators: stop talking about me, or else. Instead, she sent a different message, one louder than any lawsuit she ever filed. She exposed herself. And in doing so, she may have done more damage to her career than any critic, rumor, or post ever could. Because when you try to silence the internet doesn't forget. It fights back, it screenshots, it shares, and it never looks at you the same again. Now, the question isn't just, will Blake be punished? It's, was this her final plot twist? Because if there's one thing everyone can agree on, it's that Blake Lively won this lawsuit in only one place: in her own head.